Hey guys, we're going to talk about using CopperCube source code to make modifications. So it's all written basically in C++. Once you've got source code, and to compile the game engine using the C++ source code, you follow Just In Case's video on glitch velocity. I don't need to repeat his old video. It's pretty good. It covers everything. Just follow that exactly, and you shouldn't have any problems. You just may need to retarget the latest version of DirectX, which is in his video anyway. So that's all pretty good. Now, once you've got your source, it's a file that looks like that. It's just short for source code. Now, in that, it's got two main folders: FlaceLib and Windows 32. Now, different codes are in each of those two that you may need to update to add stuff to the game engine. So just in terms of I think you could say more of a front end code is under the Windows 32 player. It doesn't mean it's only 32-bit. It's also a 64-bit in there as well. Now the solution file, as mentioned in Just In Case's video, just open the solution file, SLN, this one here, under Windows 32. You can just double click on it, or you can Visual Studio. You can just go Open Project Solution. I've got the original backup, so I can just show you the intro of it. So there's a solution file. Open that up. Okay, so you've got your two main folders over here. Doesn't matter what you highlight here so much. Now, it defaults to debug Windows 32, but you can change that to 64-bit if you want. You can either debug it. I usually just go with release static runtime in 64-bit, because that's what I really want, and it does work. Okay, so if you were to select now and compile that now, it'll go through and compile the whole thing. It'll take a little while, and what it'll end up being is under that Windows 32 player, it'll create a new folder called x64, and there's different types of releases. There's release and static runtime. I just stick with the release particularly, and here I do all my test and debugging. So what will end up popping out is a compiled exe file. Now, I know it says Windows 32 there, but it'll run in 64-bit. I'll just show you now. So that exe opens another exe file, actually. Funnily enough, yeah, it's an exe running another exe. So this is testing. I was just testing the terrain heights, and it does work. I got the terrain heights to be readjustable. This is the default. If I press H, see that? Recalculated all the heights of the textures in the terrain, which is nice. Now I'm going to be working on trying to get the slope angle to automatically change all the textures according to the slope angle. That would be even better. It would be a lot better actually. But anyway, so that file that's running will always open test.exe file. It has to be exe at the moment because that's how it's set up, and you can see that in, I believe it's this file, cplayer.cpp. Yeah, so here's the file. I've just done Control F to search, and I do everything in Notepad++. It's a lot easier. I mean, you could theoretically use Visual Studio as well for that, but anyway. Okay, so what it's doing by default, if it's got an archive file, it'll open and run that. And the archive file, it says, it's called test.exe. I don't know if you could put CCB there, perhaps. I'm not sure. But anyway, this does work. So that archive file, if I double click on it and do a search, see it says in green here, if the archive file, what these arrows mean, yeah, good question. I'm still learning C++. I'm able to add code into the engine, but I don't know what half of it means. Alright, but anyway, it's not super hard. Some parts of it is hard actually, but some of it's not too hard. Now, I think it's sort of connected. It's like a subset of data that's held within this section, I think. That's how I understand it. Maybe that's not right. Anyway, there's a seek. See, look, there's a brackets. These brackets are key. That means it's a function. There's a function called seek, held under or connected to the archive file somehow. It's saying seek, get the look. There's another function, open and close brackets. Get the size of the archive file, size of Win32 player info. Anyway, you don't need to go into all the detail of everything. Just you need to know just basically where stuff is and how to edit it. So basically, it's looking for an archive file. If it finds it, it'll load that exe file. If it didn't have any, it couldn't find it, it wouldn't open it, obviously. So this is the code here down the bottom. 1688 line number, load from exe archive file. Yeah, it's found the archive file. It loads it that way. Now, it's all a lot of very confusing stuff. If you don't know JavaScript or other code, this stuff, C++ is friggin' a bit of a nightmare if you ask me. It is the most anal and specific and exact code. Otherwise, if it is not exact, it definitely will not work. And that means the type, the format, everything. JavaScript, you can get away with some things, but and it works out the difference. But this works nothing out. You got to do everything right. It's not super hard though. Look, here's some just key overviews. There's a bracket, open and close brackets. That means it's a function. That function is called climit release file. Now it's connected to I/O. I think it's got to do with input output. IRR, short for irrelect. Okay, so somehow it knows that IRR is short for irrelect, and it's a subset of data of the irrelect source to start with. That's called core. That's called string. That's the format. I don't know what string W is, but anyway, it's actually string W, and that's the name of the variable equals another variable. So just going back to where we were. Okay, so it's got all sorts of functions held all over the place in lots of different files. So, quick overview. This is a very small number of files in the Windows 32 player. You should try the facelib. It's got like, I don't know, 100 files there. Oh no, about 60, 70. And then you've got a whole stack of files that's not necessarily all used. Some of these files here is not used at all. It's just old data. So look at all this stuff from 2017. None of this has been edited at all since 2017. A little bit in 2018. So these are some of my recent additions. I've been updating. Let me go back to the original. Okay, so this is original as it comes, the source file from the engine at the moment, as of the beginning of 2023. So there's the recent updates in those two files there. August last year, a couple of add additions in there, and before that, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. It doesn't seem like Nico is really that keen to be doing stuff on this engine anymore, that's for sure. But anyway, not a whole lot of stuff, but you'll find that there's files all over the place. It's not just the files in here. There's also files in the irrelect source, irrelect. There'll be files in here. So where's the latest one? Okay, just because that says 30th the 1st 23, that doesn't mean something was edited in that date. No, that's just you've created that folder on that date when you downloaded the source code, that's all. So if you go in there, the latest stuff, look, it's 2017, so it's not actually that date. So in terms of actual files updated, doesn't seem like anything in here since 2017. So that's a pretty good indicator of what files have been updated when. And in some cases, obviously, it doesn't need to be updated if it's been fine years ago. There's a couple of changes 3 years ago. Yeah, a bit more back, 2018, a couple of changes. Who knows what the changes were back then? I don't know. And then 2017. Now you've got to also remember, in this engine of CopperCube at the moment, there's two main engines available. One's called SpiderMonkey. Let me just go to I believe it's this one. Go to the top. Not that one. This one. Yeah. Okay. So if I open cplayer.h, you got to remember that the names, if anything .h means it's a header file to another file of the same name .cpp. So they go together. So that one is like an opening summary file for this one. So if you open that, all I do is just always use Notepad++. That's just me. You can see that there's two engines that this CopperCube used to use. It might have been using both at the same time at one point. I don't know. But anyway, it's using the SpiderMonkey script engine at the moment. It used to use what's called Squirrel script engine, but I'm pretty sure that's not used at the moment. No longer used since like 2017. So it uses SpiderMonkey script engine. It also uses, there you go, Irrelict. Sorry, that's the sound engine. Yeah, so there you go. Irrelict uses Irrelict. So these are the different files. So this particular file called cplayer.h is linking to these other files. That's how I understand it. If anyone knows better about this stuff, then by all means let me know, because I'm still trying to learn. But even with my extremely limited skills, I was able to add quite a few bit of functionality to the engine anyway. So if any of you guys out there that actually know C++ and are good at it, well, this will be a breeze for you. But this video is mainly for noobs, complete noobs, and people just want to have a go and they know a little bit of coding. I don't think you'd want to be involved in this if you have no coding knowledge at all. It's a bit of a jump, a bit too much of a jump. But anyway, so there's there you go, SpiderMonkey engine. Now this cplayer file also holds the list of all the remember we saw the other file? These are global functions. It's called a global function. So there it is there. Switch to CCB file. Screenshots full screen. There's some of the older ones. Some of the new ones from just in case. Mouse position, render to texture, split screen, emulate key. It's not the whole list, but there's others as well. But certain files you need to put certain information in. If you're not sure, I suspect you could probably put the information in the file anyway. If you're not sure, it either just ignores it or it'll work. And if there's an error, you can always just trial and error, add and remove stuff. That's what I do. It's worked up until now. Always keep a backup of the original files. So if you're going to add or edit any existing files, I highly recommend you keep a full backup of the original source code, and then you can go start playing around with changes and see what happens. If anything goes really wrong and you've forgotten what you did or whatever, you can always restore it back to the way it was again. Okay, so cplayer.h is connected to the cplayer.cpp. Include, see that? These are all, as far as I'm aware, this is just a linkage of all the different files containing information that this file here may access. I don't know if it has to access all those things, but if it does, it'll need to be on the header file as a link. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work. It won't work. Okay, so this cplayer here, network support. Okay, so this has got to do with finalizing the final exe file, the compiled exe file with the new code of the whole engine, in other words. If you do it in 64-bit, it'll pump out the exe file. It's about 5 megabytes. So it's only small, but it is basically the whole engine in that 5 megabytes, more or less. And obviously your own CCB files compiled into an exe can be whatever size, depending on how many textures and all the rest of it. But the engine itself, yeah, it's like 5 megabytes. It's nothing. But anyway, there's a lot of information in there. So okay, so that's the release, the final 64-bit. and they're all the files at Windows 32. So I'm looking under my own source code now that I've been editing. So cplayer, cplayer.cpp, also play script library. So whenever I make changes myself, I always put in some comments so I can find it again. I just put robo, and here's my new one. There's a new API that does actually work, like I showed you before. Set terrain texture height, global function, boom, done. Now the code for that is actually held in a different file. Okay, so that's just to set up the global function. The global function allows it to be referenced in the in JavaScript, in the game engine dynamically, basically. Okay, so that's those two. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so now the script library, in some cases this actually has, it's .cpp file. This in some cases actually has the code to run stuff as well. Now in terms of my one, it does. It has the code. So not only it has the reference to the global function, the new API code. In my case, I've just called it set terrain texture height. I'll probably change it later to something else, but for now that works. And as well as the code that runs it. Now it's just called long. So a function, a little bit different to JavaScript. Formatting is everything it seems to be in C++. You need to tell it everything, otherwise it doesn't know what the hell to do. So this, how do you know it's a function? Well, it's got an open and closed brackets right there with a name before it, and typically with 2 double dots. The stuff before that relates to a different category, I believe. But basically this is a function. See, there's the opening and closing brackets down here. So that whole thing is a function. And I'm just copied the same format from previous functions that just in case and Nico has put in there previously. And I worked out a couple of things. So just copy the same format exactly. If you don't know what you're doing, just put it in there anyway. But what I worked out, this little section here, so that needs to be all consistent. Erelix, that and that format, exactly what it all means. Don't ask me exactly. I just know that it works. And this is the format. So I've copied the same format. The only difference you might want to change is if you're running a new function later on, the inputs to that function, if you have inputs, and the function itself in another file have to be the exact same format. Otherwise it's definitely not going to work. So you have to tell everything. You have to tell it what format everything has to be, otherwise it doesn't know what the hell is going on. That's this very specific thing about C++. Yeah, that's how it is. Okay, so long. Now, if this was a function that returns something, some functions, they process something and return a value. It could be a number, a string, or a Boolean value. And in this case, believe it or not, it doesn't need to return anything. I probably could have got away with calling it a void, because normally it starts. You've ever seen Unity? They use like void a lot. It looks like you're staring into a black hole and you're thinking, what the hell is a void? It's actually, yeah, it's just a function. Format of the function, that means it's not returning anything from the function. It doesn't actually return anything. Why you need to tell the game engine that, I don't know. You'd think you'd be able to work it out, wouldn't it? But anyway, you need to tell it everything. So these functions starting with long, don't ask me what long is supposed to be for. I don't know. But I just know it's not void. If it was void, then I know it's specifically saying don't return anything as a general rule. Now, obviously, there's a lot of complexity with C++. I don't understand a lot of it. But anyway, all these just start with long. C player, the name of the API, and then that's always the same. And then all it does in the beginning is when you're running a new API, you're always going to put input variables into the aren't you? You're going to be setting it to something. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3 or more information separated by a comma. And this thing here is all it's doing is it's checking that number. So in my one at the moment, set terrain texture height, you need the name, the node, you need the node of the terrain, first input. Second input, you need the first texture percentage height. Third value, you need the second texture percentage height. Now you don't need the last texture because it's just whatever's left over will be the third texture. So you only need two inputs plus the terrain node. I might change it later so you don't even need the terrain, because you can only have one terrain obviously, so I don't know why you would need to look up the node, but anyway, this works at the moment like that. So see that? Get attribute count equals 3. So that's saying how many input variables have I got, and if it's equal to the right amount that I expect, okay, then continue to write it. If it's not, then else, give me an error message. Error requires 3 inputs, terrain node, yes, texture height, texture 0 height, and texture 1 height. So that's 3 inputs. So I've got little, you should always have this little backup error messages if something's not right. Now I've got another error message here. So I'll just walk you through this. So what I've got here is that's the format. So the format in C++ typically comes right at the beginning, before the variable name, not after or anything else. It's always before. So it's saying a float, which is a decimal value, and I've just created a new variable from nothing. I don't need to put var or anything like that. Just put the name of it straight up. New variable called texture low equals attribute, get attribute as float number 1. That means the second input of the 3 inputs. So you've got starts with 0, then 1, then 2. So that's 3 inputs. In total it's 3, but the actual index here, texture low, will be the second one, and the medium is the third one, which in this case it's just called 2. Alright, actually that should be, there you go, texture 1 height. Now, okay, so I've just done a little check here. If the texture low, it's got to be between 0 and 1, can't be below or above 1, and obviously the texture medium should be higher than texture low. So I've just put, okay, texture low, it's got to be more than 0. Notice how F there means it's a float. Yeah, it's another pedantic, specific, overly dogmatic, I don't know, whatever you call it, just very overly unnecessary things you've got to add into C++. You've got to tell it the format of every damn thing, otherwise it doesn't know what the hell to do. Even though you've put 0.0, it doesn't know it's a decimal unless you tell it it's a float. Okay, alright. So texture low, it's got to be greater than 0. You can't just put 0 or 0.0, you have to put the F in there if it's a float, no matter what. And, yeah, so and, that's the same as JavaScript, you can put that. And texture low has got to be less than 1. There it is there. And, in this case, texture medium should be greater than texture low. Yes, which it is. And texture medium should also be less than 1, which it is. Actually, in this case, more accurate would be texture low should be less than texture medium. And yes, don't even need that actually. Texture low got to be greater than 0. Yes. Texture low has got to be less than texture medium. Yes. And texture medium has to be less than 1. So that makes sense, doesn't it? So that's all I really needed there. So if that's correct, do that. Else, give me an error message. Error message, heights must be in decimal value greater than 0 and less than 1. Okay, so if it's done these checks, seems alright. Okay, now this is the particular formatting you've got to get right, otherwise it will not work. Now this particular bit of text here has to be linked to the correct stuff that you're referencing. In this case, it's called cflace terrain seed node. How do I know that? Well, I'm dealing with the terrain. Let's open the terrain file, which is under flacelib, There it is there. Flace, cflace terrain seed node. That's the name of the file. Is that how I know that's... I was actually told this by Just In Case, but how would you know that? Well, yeah, maybe that's what that is, that little asterisk next to it. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Could be that could be why. I couldn't get it to reference it for a while there. Oh look, there it is, debug name. Flace terrain seed node. Maybe maybe that's specifically that. Or maybe it's specifically under the constructor. But anyway, it's all the same, isn't it? So it's saying that the files held under this file name cflace terrain seed node, then you can access, give me the access to those functions and information so I can do something. Obviously it's always very limited what you can do and access. So going back here, so terrain, this is the name of the variable. I think we'll just create it out of the blue. Equals cflace terrain seed node, which is the subset of data or the name of the folder or file that we're accessing, or whatever. And then the attribute, get attribute as user pointer. Notice that in 0, that's the index. So in other words, the first input, which is in my case, it's the node. I might be changing this later. If I don't need to input the terrain node, I'll get rid of it because it's totally unnecessary. You can only have one terrain anyway. But anyway, for now, that's what it's doing. It's saying terrain. Okay, within this sort of group of data or that file name, set this little arrow there. It's connected. It goes in order. It's saying from here go to here. I should really study C++ because I don't know what half the formatting even does or is or means. It's a bit awkward when you're trying to add stuff to the engine, isn't it? 3 weeks of not knowing what you're doing. Anyway, terrain. Okay, so this is the name of my function. Yes, this is the API, but the API runs another function called set texture heights. Now that set texture heights function I've created in that file name called cflace terrain seed node.cpp. So if I just go here, Control F, Control V, paste that in, do a search, there's my function I created. I created that from nothing, that's my code. So there you go. So it's a void, means it doesn't have to return anything. This is the, I don't know, the parent group of data. I don't know exactly how you'd explain that. Dot dot, 2 dot dots, whatever that means. And then this is the name of my function. Now it's saying, see that open and close brackets? That means it's a function. And there's the well, that's not right, is it? That open and close bracket should finish here. Okay, so this one. Okay, I was in the middle of adding something to this code. That's why I was doing that. So there it is there, open and close. So that's the data for this function here. So normally it's, of course, you can do it like that if you want. I don't see why that's no problem. But typically they always have it. Well, Nico anyway likes to do it this way. I don't know if it's required. It may be required. I don't know. I'm not going to just try it. I'm just going to leave it as it is, because I know it works. If you know it works, best to leave it. That's generally the way it is. Okay, so that's my function. Now it's saying, see that? The first input, see, notice how the format comes first. The format of this input is of that name. Now, that, like in JavaScript, you know, you can actually call the inputs to a function, or the parameters, I think they call it. You can call it whatever you want. So long as you reference that exact same name inside of the function, it really doesn't matter. And that's what I've done here. I've just called it t-texture low, t-texture medium. So there it is, and there it is. Now that format had to be exact match. It's float 32. So that's a float inputs, 2 float inputs in other words. Has to match I don't know if it's anywhere recorded in here, is it? here it is, get attribute as float. See that? It's all has to match. Float, float, integer, integer, blah blah blah. All that has to match. Here's one, get attribute as bool, so that's true and false. Press down. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So different APIs you'll want it to do different stuff. So this one, so every time there's an open and closed bracket with a name in front of it, it means it's a function. What about this one? Well, that's a bit weird. Not sure about that one. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of differentiating things in C++ than JavaScript, I've noticed. Makes me really appreciate JavaScript after looking at C++. I gotta say, this stuff is way more complex. To me, it looks so unnecessarily complex. You have to be honest about it, yeah, as well. Anyway. Alright, so you got your different ones. Just obviously the formatting has to be exact. If it doesn't, there'll be an error, it won't work, it'll have a tissy fit and just completely fall over when you try and compile it. So it has to be exact match. I actually had this wrong to start with. I had an S32, I was copying the format from a previous one that was actually different. So just be aware of that. The format, you has to match the format you set, and that's it. Okay, so I've put these two variables. What I've done is I've said, okay, you run this, the API runs this new function. The function, all it does is set these global variables to equal to the inputs. There's the inputs that you set, and these two are global variables. How do I know that? Let's go Control F, and we'll go up the top. See, look at that, line 39. We're up the top now. It's like global variables in JavaScript. You've just thrown it up the top. It's basically a global variable that can be accessed anywhere in this file, I think. I don't know about all files. No, just this file, I think. Under this subset of data, C-Flace terrain seed node. At least that's how I understand it anyway. Okay, so global variable now gets updated. Just before it was a set thing in the terrain heights. I mean, it's only a small improvement, but I can add stuff to it later. It's fine. Now, what I've done was, with this particular API, I had to get the max height. So the actual main function that I need to update was this one. It's already set up, already in the system. But see here, I got rid of used to be a specific set figure, and I've changed the set figure to a variable, which then can be overridden with the API. So you can change the heights, whatever you want. That's a much better system, you ask me. So that's how I did it. All I did was change that and those two variables, and that's all I did. I actually created these as global variables from nothing. There was no global variables called that before, but I just chucked it in there, and it works. So there it is there. Because I looked at the top, typically with JavaScript, same thing. Opening var this equals blah blah blah. If it's not inside a function, it means it's a global variable. I think this is the same thing. So there's the max height. Start with a 0. I added these two from scratch, so it's 0.2 and 0.9 that's pretty much your default setup in CopperCube, but it gets overridden by when you run the API. My new API command, it gets changed to whatever you want. You can change it. Okay, so that's a quick intro. So I don't need to go into the detail how I coded this. It gets a bit too complex and long-winded, but I just want to show you some of the basic ways of adding new stuff into the engine. So this will get the max height. It runs this code to run the max height just really quickly, which is not that one, not that one. This is the one. This is the function. See that? There's the format. That's the parent type of info. This is the name of the function. There's the open and close brackets. All I did was I had to add that line in there. It wasn't there before. So just in short, if you open a new exe file with a terrain in it, maximum height by default starts at 0. unless you created your terrain in the editor, it'll be 0. So in other words, it has no max height to work with. So I actually had to create that and put that in there. So I'll just go back to where I was. Yeah, here. So I'd done that. Recalculate max height as may not be in memory, and that's why it wasn't working before. Now it works. Then I just redo the textures as normal, standard function. Hardly changed it at all. All I did was just change the first texture and second texture heights, so it can be adjustable, and then update the meshes from terrain data. That's a big function that updates a lot of stuff. Whenever you make a change, it runs it anyway. And it runs quick and it's fine. Now here I'm going to try and work out the vertex normals and blah 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 other stuff later on. But that's for me later on. But this is just an example of one of the files I had to change. Now for each node type or action or different type of things, it'll have a different file typically with that information in it. So for example, this one here, that's about terrains obviously, and there's the header file. You need to update the header file as well. Normally, I'm not sure, did I update this one or not? I'm not sure actually. Yeah, I think I did. I had to add my function in there, is that right? There you go. There it is. So I added that in. So there's a list of all the voids or functions that don't return anything, and I've just thrown that under no specific spot, just a whole list of different virtual public. It's under public. It's a class. See, that's a class. I think it's called a class. C-Face Terrain Node. So it has to be under that class. And under public, it's all that stuff there. Now this is protected stuff. I don't understand the differences, frankly, but there's a difference. Maybe it's like a global variable versus a private variable. I don't know. It's something like that. But anyway, where did I put mine? I put mine under just the standard non-protected, just the standard public one. So there it is there. And that format obviously has to match float32 and the same name of the variables exactly. Don't ask me why you need a header file and all the rest of it. I don't know. That's just C++ for you. Okay, so lots of different files. Look, you've got trees, error messages, loading DDS. Each file tends to be dedicated to a certain type of thing to make it easier, I suppose. There's the script engine there, header file for it. There's a library file as well. Yeah, so I always have a backup. I've got my own adjusted library file, but it didn't really seem to be doing anything, so I just restored the original one. In this case, always have the original copy somewhere if you need to restore it. In Notepad++, you can actually open two files and compare the differences between them and only highlight the exact differences. That sometimes can help if you want as well. But as you can see, publish settings, it's even got publish settings. You don't get any editor. With the source code of CopperCube, you've got to remember there's no editor code. You can't run an editor. There's no editor. You can't use the existing editor either, as best I know of. But the information for publishing stuff is nonetheless still there, but you just can't use it, I don't think. Okay, so you can see serializer. Now, from what I've gathered, I could be wrong on this, but I think it's basically like saving and loading. A serializer is to save it, and a deserializer is to load it. I don't know why they call it serializer. Just, anyway, but that seems to be what it's doing. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few other changes I made. There's the train seed node. There's the spider monkey engine. Light scene node. Now this is the one I used to edit the directional light. So if I go open that up, and I just search for Robbo, because that's what I put my little notes with, I added this stuff in. Float 32 flows. That's like the class, and this is the name of the internal function, if you like, and it returns the light data in a cone. So I've got the spotlight working. I can change the direction. I can access and change the outer cone, the inner cone, the fall off, and the radius and the attenuation. I can dynamically change any of that stuff as I like. It doesn't really work well for like a flashlight type scenario. I'll be honest, I would not use it for that. I've tried it. It's not very good because as you make the flashlight size smaller to make it look like a proper flashlight, it doesn't, with low poly meshes, it doesn't show a nice round circular highlight area. It just doesn't work that way. It has a really terrible vertex shading that turns on and off. So if you're really using low poly stuff with it, it's totally unusable unless you make it really big and wide. That's why point lights tend often to be a lot better, actually. I can see why Nico never bothered to make the flashlight accessible, because it's not really usable. He's done that a lot of things, I've noticed, with the game engine. Even with these skyboxes, and you add fog, you notice there's a terrible glitching in the corners of the skyboxes, and you move around and view the camera. Well, default game engine and CopperCube comes with very light grey background texture. And it's the reason is because to cover up that problem. It's clearly done that way. It's obvious. That and a lot of things have been done in the engine to try and cover up some of the mistakes, if you like, or issues with the game engine. And this has definitely been one of them. That's why the spotlight was never made available to change its direction. But it's still, you can still use it good in a way. Just make it. You can't really use it as a spotlight particularly well. That's all, unless your stuff you're looking at is in the far distance. But when you're up close to a wall, it looks terrible. It doesn't work well at all. So I've got all these new things I added. I think I added all these ones. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Get radius. I got get in a cone, set in a cone. So I've done the same formatting. I've just copied it all the way through. This is already there. Oh, sorry, that's already existing. So that's the how the attenuation. Attenuation, it directly affects the brightness of the light. Works. It goes 0 and then 1 divided by the radius and then 0. And normally that's pretty good. You can tweak it, but it doesn't really work too well. You generally stick to this formula, works quite well for the most part. Now, all I've done is a couple of little adjustments. Now ELT directional, that's anything in capitals. I could be mistaken once again. I'm only learning, and there's whole stack I don't really know properly. It seems to be the internal DirectX code is in capitals. I could be wrong, or it could be just the formatting Nico likes to use for certain stuff. I don't know, but that's my impression anyway. EAC box has got something to do with the culling type of different nodes. Yep, this is EL direction tells me that this node type is a directional light basically, and the actual directional light means the do not cull the distance. At a distance, don't cull anything of that node, the lighting or anything. Obviously you would with point lights and spotlights. You'd want that to drop off eventually, but not with the directional light. That's the only one here. See that? Do light recalculation. Okay, so let me just find some of my changes. Okay, so I've added this stuff in here. As you can see, serialize base attributes. So like save the information. Otherwise it's wouldn't work. Wouldn't work unless I did it this way. So it's saying the light data type is equal to point light or equal to a spotlight. Then what it was doing is just saving the radius cast shadow, and that's it. That's all it had before, those two things. And I added in attenuation, outer cone, inner cone, and fall off. And that it means, and you can actually save and use it that way in a dynamic way. And I've also changed it here. Not just directional light has direction, but now spotlight has as well. I added that in as well. Okay. And radius. Now this is the deserialized attributes. So a lot of that stuff was already there. I think I just added that one only. This is getting the radius from memory. Before you couldn't actually get the radius. So that, see that, if exists in exist attribute, that's just some sort of function that looks up the attributes, and it says if it has an attribute called radius, then get the attribute as float. Here it's float. Different things will have different formats, so just make sure you always get the format right. It has to be very exact. And then set the radius to light data radius. I'm just copying the same type of format in other things. I added this as well. Outer cone, inner cone. So light data, that seems to be like an array of information or an object of information. So that dot outer core, dot inner core, dot fall off. A bit like JavaScript in that sense. I think that's what that is. Yeah, so I've just enhanced it using the same formatting. It wasn't that hard to try to play around with it and work it out. See that? If exists attribute direction, this was already there, but I just modified it. I can't remember what was there before, but I've just changed it to so that, and then it only needs to get the attribute direction to then normalize it and use it as a directional light, which then includes the spotlight. Yep, okay. So it wasn't a lot of changes there actually. Well, there's a couple, I guess. There was there's a little bit of adjustment there, but just in terms of the direction only and nothing else, it wasn't that hard to change. Okay, so that's an example of getting a directional light to work because it's held under the C-Face light scene node. So any lights in the scene will be under this file. So you need to change that one. Any terrains, you need to update that one, the header file and the CPP file. Okay, so what about some other stuff? Why there's a Visual Studio Code project file held under the FlaceLib folder. I don't know, I don't run it, I don't use it, I just use the solutions file. It works just fine. Now another file called SpiderMonkey Script Engine Library. Now that has more information in it. Okay, there's none of my additions in that as well. I probably was playing with something at some point and then removed it. But as you can see, there's a lot of code. There it is. There's line collide with bounding box of scene node. Set scene node property. That's probably the most important one in the. It's a whole stack of things it does. Yeah, don't go playing with things like that, obviously, unless you know what you're doing. Better to create a whole new one rather than touch an existing working thing. Get scene node. Okay. Get scene node type string from. That's weird. Haven't seen that one. Get scene node property. Now CCB library get scene node property. Why it's got the LOB in there? I don't know the difference. I don't understand why, but there's a reason for it, obviously. So some of them have library in it. I don't know if it's actually needed, to be honest. I haven't seen a reason for that, but obviously there must be some reason, because just in case has got it updated. So he's added in the global function CCB get animated joint position, and also here CCB library get animated joint position. Have to probably ask just in case about that one. Okay, so just going back to the original untouched information. So basically, as I went, so just a summary overview again. These are your main files you want to change. If you're going to change update stuff, cplayer library script, cplayer, cplayer.cpp. What about, probably not that one, I don't think. And then also maybe the Spider Monkey script engine, you might want to update that. Maybe the library file if it's needed, and possibly these two if it's needed as well. Here's one called extension script property. That's interesting. Let's have a look at that. That was updated about 6 months ago. Let's have a look. I'm not sure what's in it actually. Set texture. Oh, looks like global variables. Set texture. I've seen that around the place. Serialized properties. Deserialized properties. I don't know. I take a guess these are just generic functions used anywhere. I could be wrong, but that seems like what it is. Generate initial. Yeah, so I wouldn't be touching any of this myself. Texture property fixed. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so not a lot of stuff in there anyway. Yeah, obviously I wouldn't be changing anything unless you know what you're doing, but follow the same procedure and method used in other stuff. Is typically the way to go. Test it out. Okay, so we're going to test out my code. We're already in release 64-bit. We'll just run that. Already got an error. Well, that's no good. What's the error? Two failed. Okay, this is I've linked a new backup version of the Windows STK, and it's the misalignment of the Windows STK. So let me just get out of that. Let open. Yeah, so I was using the backup. I don't use that. I only use that as a backup of store of information, but really I use this one. Okay, so let's use that. So release.64, run that. We'll just wait for that to finish. Take about a minute or two. Alright, so we got some errors. There were build errors. I always just click no and then look at the errors. Okay, this is the files I've been working on. Vertices, undeclared variable, okay, and syntax error. Okay, so there's the name of the file and there's the line number. Place scene node, yeah, I've just recently been working on that, so I would expect that would be the file anyway. Let's go to get out of backup, go back into the main section. There's the terrain scene node. I'll just search for Robbo, the additions, changes. Okay, so this is not finished yet, so I'm just going to comment it out until I'm ready to work with that, and you'll see now it should work probably alright. Okay, so that's already built and done. The first time you run it will take a lot longer, then every time after that it'll only look at the changes and then redo those changes, so it'll be quicker afterwards. Okay, so now you're left with the black box. There's nothing in it, but it actually is running. It's just you haven't it's just not showing up anything, so you don't need that. You just close it off, and to actually see any changes, let's go back to Windows 32, sort it by x64 release. So you can see this will be the new file that was just created. So look at that, 22nd 11:10 PM. It's the same as, see that down here, my time. It's just been created. Okay, so that exe file will then run this test.exe file, and you can see that by, if I open this file here. Okay, so this is the CCB file. which all at the moment is for testing. All I've done is press H, get the name, C node of the name of my terrain, and then use my new API, set terrain texture height T 0.1, 0.8. So let's change that to something more radical so you can see. Actually, let's make that 0.3 there. I'll just make that 0.1, that's probably okay. 0.1, 0.3, and then the other part of it, the third texture, will be the other 0.7 above the 0.3 to the end. So if we save that, publish it, then just exit out of it. So that's created the test.exe file. So now if I run this Windows 32 player.exe, it'll open the test.exe file. There it is there. So if I press H, let's check the textures now. Haha, totally different. Yeah, so you can do some weird and wonderful things. But at least that API there is there. You can then adjust whatever values you want. Obviously you probably wouldn't use those values, but I mean, yeah, if you wanted to, you could. It doesn't seem to be, that's another issue. The blending of the textures across changes, it doesn't seem to, I could probably look at that and probably change the blending setup. It's not terrible. Some parts of it work alright. Like there, it actually works pretty good. But here, no. So I need to look at that. Okay, so now if you want to do more, when you're checking that, it's running an exe file, so it doesn't give you any debug error messages, but you actually can override that. I've got here, this is the location of where I keep my source code. So you're going to run it through the command prompt now. At least that's one way to do it. So users Rob, paste that in. So I want to go to new directory called new directory under Robbo, documents, CopperCube, blah, 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 blah. Enter. So there it is. And now I need to run the actual exe file, which is, there it is, Windows Player 32.exe, and then I want to have debugging with it. So you just have space dash debug. And just paste that in, Control V, press enter, runs it straight away. So now you've got a debug console in your exe file, so you can see error messages that way. That's a much better way. So you go, there's press H. So I mean, I could print out an error message or any message I want using that debugger, and you just keep doing that same thing, copy paste this part here and run it. It's quite easy and quick. I mean, you can also edit this file here. Where would you put that in there? When you dash debug, it goes in there somewhere. I don't think you put it there because that affects the name of the actual file. Location. It's not editable. Anyway, there is another way if you wanted to, but if you're going to keep making changes and keep compiling the code, you probably wouldn't want to do that because it's going to override it every time. So there's debugging for you. Windows 32 Player actually is the one I was updating. I think it was this one. I think Player Script Library. I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So this is the code I was looking at before. And this is where the error message, in this particular instance, to prick out an error message into the debug console when you're running an exe, you have to put it in this format. Well, even if you're using the editor, which you can't, but if you was, it would still show up. Last prayer, scripting, get earlier device, get logger, and then log that message. I can change that. If you just want to see that I can show an error message, I can throw that in here. And just put Okay, it's working, or whatever you want, whatever message you want, just as a test, just so you can see. So I save that. Don't need to exit out of the file, you can just leave it like that, and then you recompile it. And it's only updating that one extra file, so it should be pretty quick. And it's done. Just wait until it's finished. So that means it's actually running, but it's just not showing anything. So close that, go back here under 64 release, there it is. That's just been created again, recreated 1118, and if I run that, I want the debug information, so I'm going to need to run the command console cmd, paste that in, and then paste this in. Okay, so now that's running the new created exe file, which then opens the another exe file. So we press H now. See that? Okay, it's got a little message to say, okay, it's working up the top right. So that does work. So you'll need things like that when you're trying to add stuff to the engine to test out all your error messages and make sure things are working as you'd expect, that sort of thing. So that's what you want to do. Yeah. So that's a very quick overview of CopperCube source code and a little bit of an overview on how to update stuff. Obviously, so on these two folders here, there's a lot more information under this one, flacelib, than the other one. And also in some cases I believe you need to go into erelect. Sometimes it's the include, and sometimes it's the source, and then erelect, and then stuff in there. You may need to look at changing if you want to change something. Other cases it might be in here. Well, that's JavaScript. I don't know about that one. Probably not that one. Yeah. What about this one? No, hasn't been updated since 2020, according to that. Bullet physics, that's interesting. I haven't even looked at that. 2017, probably no changes since about then. Yeah, probably not. You'd have to go through every folder to really check that to see if there's any changes, but yeah, it doesn't appear since for a while any changes on that one. Asimp, I don't know what that's meant to resemble or what the hell that is, but anyway, let's have a look. 2018, the latest date. Yeah, so you can see it's really mainly just the files in mainly in these two folders that you want to update, and it's typically a separate file by itself like that, most cases. Yeah, play movie, a lot of stuff, a lot of files in here. Physics, delete, clone, action extensions. Now I want to show you how did I change the camera. Okay, if you're wondering how I updated the first person camera to add in like rotation speed and other things like that, it was actually really simple. I just opened this file, cplayer.cpp, under Windows 32 player folder, and I just looked at the code, and you notice here there's movement speed, there's the player movement speed that you add, you know, play hash player1.movement speed. You set that to another figure using the default menus, or I think you can use the JavaScript as well. It's pretty simple. You can just follow the format. See that there? It's there it is. EFAT camera FPS. That's the first person camera controller. That's the separate. These are different behaviors. There's the behavior for just the keyboard controlled, and there's another one for game AI. So that EFAT camera, I just copied that. So there's sound volume. That's gross top level sound volume of everything. There's collision small distance, There's damage and movement speed. You already probably know about those, but I added just a couple of new ones. Rotation speed. See that? Just camera just added the same format. There you go. Set rotation speed. Get value as integer. I just copied the same format. All I did was change the name of it. Basically, it's pretty. That was easy. That was really easy. Other parts of it have been difficult, but that was easy. And there's jump speed. There's also can fly. Can fly is a good one if you're doing ladder climbing. You just look up, turn the gravity off, and you go straight up in the air, up the ladder. Get to the top, exit off a little proximity box, and then turn the gravity back on and turn off can fly, and then yeah, you do the same going down again. That's a really good one for that. Or if you've got maybe a jetpack game, the guy's flying around or he wants to run out of fuel, you can turn it on and off dynamically as well, so that's good. Jump speed, yeah, you could change that if you need to. Wasn't that hard to change. Yeah, so now did I have to change these functions? I can't remember, to be honest. I actually can't remember. I'd have to check on that. But anyway, so you can see typically adding new stuff on it, it's not always as hard as you think. Sometimes it's just working out what format do I need. Look, there's an attribute of health, which will, if it's got to do, yeah, it's alright, the game AI, which could be the player or the enemy. Movement speed could be any of the three behaviors. There's game AI, keyboard controlled separate behavior, or the first person camera. Damage, sound volume. So why is this repeated twice? It seems like the information is repeated twice. I'm not really sure actually. Temporary variable, that's the name of the function. Create temporary variable if possible, whereas this one, go all the way up, that's called save content of potentially terrible variable into source. Probably needs a bit more testing to see whether do I really need to update this section here as well. Probably do. There's obviously a reason for it. Nico wouldn't have done it for no reason, so maybe I do. Yeah, but so there's load from file. Yeah, so there's, oh, that's, it won't actually load the test CCB. Maybe if I got rid of the ability to load the exe file, it might actually load that. I'm not sure, I'd have to check. But anyway, that's a quick overview of how to view, edit and change a few things in CopperCube source, how to show the debugging, and deal with a few error messages. Yeah, so I mean, feel free to make comments. Obviously I'm only learning C++ recently, so don't be too hard in the comments. And if you want to help and update the source code in the engine for more cool stuff, that would be awesome. I'm sure there's a lot of you programmers out there way better than myself, like easily be able to do all this stuff without a problem. It'd be great if you could do that and share some of your work. It'd be awesome. Anyway, thanks for that. I hope to help some people, and see you the next one. Cheers.